Mia awoke to the sound of heavy rain tapping against the thin window of her small apartment. In the dim light of dawn, every drop seemed to echo the heaviness in her heart, a reminder of the unrelenting struggles of another day. With barely enough money to pay rent and put food on the table, each morning was a challenge, and dreams or luxuries often pushed aside for practical survival. Today, as she dressed hastily in her worn-out clothes, Mia could not shake off the nagging worry about her unpaid bills. She stepped outside, clutching her umbrella, and joined the hustle of the rainy city streets. The pavements glistened under the streetlights, and for a fleeting moment, she admired the beauty of the rain despite the hardships. Across the busy intersection, a sleek car sparkled even in the murk. It was a striking contrast to her modest life, a testament to opulence and power that Mia had only seen in magazines and luxury shop windows. At the wheel was Alexander Reed, a man whose name resonated with success and high status in the business world. Lost in his own thoughts and the weight of decisions that awaited him at the towering glass building of his company, Alexander was deep in concentration. As fate would have it, a slip, a misstep, or perhaps a cruel twist of destiny brought their worlds crashing together. Mia, caught in a moment of distraction and worry, stepped off the curb just as the light changed. She heard the screech of tires and a sudden, deafening impact. For a heartbeat, time froze. The bustling noise of the city dimmed to a soft murmur, and all that existed was that overwhelming shock of metal and despair. Mia sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face, not just from the pain of the collision, but from the deep, unspoken fear of what this accident could mean for her already fragile life. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding with the realization that her act of misfortune could irreversibly change the course of everything. Inside the luxurious car, Alexander gripped the steering wheel with a mixture of anger and disbelief. His normally composed face betrayed a hint of shock, and his mind raced through the possibilities. Had someone been hurt? Was this just an unfortunate mishap? He quickly glanced out of the window, his eyes locking onto the distraught figure of Mia in the downpour. Without a second thought, despite the frustration bubbling within him, Alexander stepped out of the car. His expensive suit, soaked from the drizzle, did little to mask the concern in his eyes. Even as his mind screamed about the inconvenience, his heart could not ignore the suffering mirrored on Mia's face. "What happened?" he asked, his voice laced with a rare note of vulnerability amid his stern facade. Mia's voice trembled as she managed to whisper, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." Her words faded away into the sound of falling rain, each syllable weighted with regret and hopelessness. Alexander's initial irritation began to give way to something unexpected. Here was a young woman, caught unawares in the chaos of life, and behind that apology lay a story of hardship that resonated with his own hidden loneliness. Despite the dented car and the unforeseen disruption to his morning routine, he knew that sometimes fate had a way of steering lives down unexpected paths. "Let's get you all right," Alexander said, extending his hand with an earnestness that belied his previous composure. "Are you hurt? Can I call someone for you?" Mia hesitated, looking into eyes that held a mixture of authority and compassion, qualities she had rarely seen directed at someone like her. The silence between them spoke volumes. In that quiet exchange, a bridge began to form, one between the opulence of a life she could barely imagine and the raw, genuine humanity that she recognized in his tone. As the rain continued to fall, washing the streets and softening the harsh edges of the morning, Mia felt an unfamiliar stirring of hope. Perhaps, in this collision of worlds, there was a chance not just for repair of the car's dented surface, but for healing the unseen scars of her life. Alexander's voice softened further as he continued, "I know today is hard, and I can see that you're scared, but accidents happen. We'll figure this out together." In that moment, something within Mia shifted. A faint glimmer of possibility began to outshine the gloom of uncertainty. Thus began a day that neither of them would ever forget. A day when an unforeseen accident served as the catalyst for a journey of self-discovery, courage, and change. The city around them buzzed with the usual rhythm of life, yet for Mia and Alexander, The ordinary had transformed into an extraordinary intersection of fate and chance. The clamor of the rainy street had resumed its persistent rhythm by the time Mia and Alexander's immediate crisis showed the first signs of settling. The accident, though brief in duration, had rippled through the early morning like shock waves, leaving an indelible mark on both lives. The moment that had frozen time was now replaced by a maelstrom of questions, second glances, and the silent weight of regret. Alexander stood by his car, still dripping from the rain. His mind tried to piece together the unexpected jolt that had disrupted his structured routine. The unexpected vulnerability in his voice, the concern for the stranger outside his vehicle, began to dissolve the protective barriers he had built over years of managing the pressures of being a CEO. Mia, meanwhile, felt every bit the victim of fate. Her hands trembled as she tried to brush away the rain, and tears mixed on her tear-streaked face. She looked around anxiously, ever aware of passers-by who might witness her humiliation. In her small world, every mistake carried an enormous cost. Yet, as she glanced up, she could see not anger but concern in the eyes of a man who seemed both out of reach and yet unbelievably human in this moment. As Alexander's assistant arrived, a young officer who wore empathy as naturally as his uniform, he knew the moment required both responsibility and genuine compassion. "Miss, are you sure you're all right?" the officer asked gently. Mia managed a nod, although every fiber of her being screamed internal panic. Alexander then knelt slightly to be on a level with Mia. "I'm really sorry this happened," he said, his tone earnest. "I should have been more mindful, and I understand this must be frightening for you." He paused, allowing the sincerity of his words to sink into the charged air between them. "Please," Mia whispered, her voice quivering, "I didn't mean to be careless. I was lost in my thoughts about how to pay for tomorrow's bus ticket and rent. I never imagined this would happen." Her voice trailed off, weighed down by the relentless burden of everyday struggles that now, in that rainy moment, felt all too tangible. Their eyes lingered on one another, not in judgment, but in a fragile mutual recognition of hardship. In that brief encounter, the vast difference between their worlds was softened by a shared moment of human vulnerability. Alexander's heart, hardened by deals and boardroom battles, found itself moved by the raw honesty in Mia's eyes. He saw in her the burdens and quiet battles of someone who had endured more than her fair share of misfortune. After ensuring Mia was seated on a nearby curb, shielded slightly by a battered umbrella, the officer began exchanging details with Alexander for insurance and accident reports. Over the background murmur of routine police talk, Mia's mind whirled in confusion. How could one moment be filled with such overwhelming fear, and the next offer the possibility of kindness from someone in a life so different from hers? Alexander's thoughts wandered as he processed the details of the incident. The luxury car, a symbol of achievement in his world, now bore a dent and scratches that echoed the sudden intrusion into his neatly ordered life. Yet, as he reread the look on Mia's face, he began to see that some dents leave behind marks that can heal into stories of change, rather than just scars. As the officers completed their initial report, Alexander hesitated. He could have easily written off the accident as an unfortunate day in the life of business, a minor inconvenience. Instead, he leaned closer to Mia, lowering his voice so as not to be overheard by passers-by. "Listen, I know this isn't how either of us planned our day," Alexander began slowly, "but I can see you're really struggling, and if you'd allow me, I'd like to help you get through this. Whether it's contacting someone for you, or maybe just talking for a moment, if you want." Mia blinked, surprised by the gentleness in his tone, a tone she rarely encountered. I don't know what to say," she stammered. Her life had always taught her to be wary of help, especially from people who belonged to another world entirely. "Say nothing right now," he said kindly. "Take your time. All I want is for you to be safe and okay. Here is my card," Alexander added, reaching into the folded pocket of his suit and drawing out a pristine business card. "Not to remind you of how much different we are, but to let you know that if you ever need anything, you have a way to reach out, even if it's just someone who listens." Mia's fingers caressed the card as if it were a talisman of hope. "Thank you," she managed, her voice still barely above a whisper. The simple act, this card, became a symbolic bridge between two disparate lives. After the formalities had passed, the exchange of insurance information, statements to the officer, and photographs of the accident scene, the rain began to ease. Yet, for both Mia and Alexander, the effects of the collision would linger well beyond the physical damage to the car. In the ensuing hours, Alexander returned to his office, but found that his mind was no longer on boardroom figures or profit margins. Instead, his thoughts repeatedly circled back to Mia and the fragile connection formed during those frantic moments on the wet pavement. Something in her reminded him that true life was often found in unexpected corners, far from his meticulously curated world of success. Across town, Mia sat on a stoop beneath a faded awning, the business card clutched tightly in her hand. She stared out onto the city, a sprawling maze of bright lights and dark alleys, with a newfound awareness. The accident had been terrifying, but in its wake had come a small beacon of kindness. It was a reminder that perhaps not every rich man's heart was as cold as society presumed, and maybe there was space for hope even in her bleak world. As the day wore on, both characters sought moments of solitude to reflect on the morning's events. Inside his spacious, though suddenly hollow, office, Alexander sat by a window watching the city slowly awaken. In the quiet morning after the storm, he allowed himself to ponder the layers behind Mia's hurried apology and trembling demeanor. While the accident was minor in the scope of his multi-million-dollar empire, it struck a chord deep within him. He recalled the fast-paced nature of his life, a life filled with board meetings, high-stake negotiations, and a constant battle against loneliness hidden beneath expensive suits and well-practiced smiles. Alexander realized that behind every challenge, there remained a constant desire for genuine human connection. Mia, in her unguarded moment of vulnerability, had inadvertently reminded him of his own inner conflicts and the often unnoticed beauty in simple acts of care. Wrestling with a mixture of regret and a stirring of possibility, Alexander resolved that the accident would not simply be recorded as another mundane disruption. Instead, it would mark the beginning of something unexpected, an opportunity to look beyond the cold calculations of success and to perhaps reconnect with the raw, honest parts of life that he had long suppressed. Mia, trying to return to the rhythm of her day, found herself pausing now and then to think about the man in the luxury car. In the quiet lull between her errands, the memory of his gentle voice and the softness in his eyes would wash over her like a comforting balm. She was no stranger to hardship, yet the small spark of kindness had lit within her a question. Could life really change by a single encounter? As she walked through the busy market streets later that afternoon, Mia began to notice little details that once escaped her notice. An elderly man sharing a meal with a stray dog, a young mother laughing as her child danced in the rain. The way the city itself seemed to breathe with a kind of hidden compassion. In these fleeting glimpses, she discovered that kindness wasn't reserved solely for the privileged. It was woven into the fabric of everyday struggles. Mia tucked Alexander's card into the inside of her worn purse, a secret she promised herself to keep safe until she could find a moment of bravery to call. She wondered, not without a touch of apprehension, whether accepting help would mean admitting her vulnerabilities to a world that often judged her too harshly. The evening descended, casting long shadows on the crowded sidewalks and reflecting off puddles that held the fading light of day. Mia prepared herself for another ordinary night, her heart still carrying the weight of the day's events. Meanwhile, Alexander drove home in quiet contemplation, each turn on the rain-slicked streets a reminder of how unpredictable life could be. In the solitude of their respective abodes, both began to plan for tomorrow, a day that, however ordinary it might appear on its surface, carried with it the promise of change. For Alexander, tomorrow meant a day at his office filled with financial reports and boardroom meetings, yet tinged now with personal revelations. For Mia, it meant a quiet hope that the kindness offered might someday lead to more than just fleeting relief from her daily battles. Little by little, the accident, a moment that once seemed solely catastrophic, began to morph into a catalyst for transformation. It was as if fate had gently nudged the two so that they would cross paths again, to help bridge the glaring divides of social and economic differences that had long seemed insurmountable. In the days that followed the accident, both Mia and Alexander found themselves quietly aware of a subtle shift within. Alexander made a habit of pausing by the building's front entrance, his eyes scanning the busy street for a glimpse of a familiar figure. He knew that reaching out could be awkward, even intrusive, but his intuition whispered that there was something in those fleeting moments that might lead to a deeper understanding of both himself and the world around him. Mia, too, began to view her daily walk to the bus stop and the grocery store with fresh eyes. In moments of reflection, while waiting in line at a small diner or during a brief pause at a neighborhood park, she thought often about the accident and the man who, even amid a crisis, had chosen empathy over indifference. The memory of the encounter became a small beacon of resolve, that even a single act of genuine kindness could spark a transformation unlikely to be measured by material wealth. As dusk melted into night and the city settled back into its familiar rhythm, the collision of a poor girl and a millionaire CEO continued to echo quietly in the spaces between their daily lives. Both had been touched by the randomness of fate, a collision that was both literal and metaphorical, reshaping their perceptions of who they were and what they could become. Alexander's office phone buzzed with messages from the day's meetings, yet he found himself pausing before each call, recalling the softness of Mia's gaze and the depth of her unspoken story. Meanwhile, Mia tucked herself into a threadbare bed, the gently crumpled card on her bedside table a silent reminder that even in a world of hardship, there was sometimes a lifeline extended from a place she had never imagined existed. In that fragile twilight between past and future, each of them began to understand that accidents, though chaotic and unpredictable, might just hold the power to realign the course of one's destiny. Their separate lives, one defined by wealth and the other by want, had briefly overlapped, and in doing so, had sown the seeds of a bond that would challenge the expectations of both society and themselves. The morning after the accident brought its own kind of calm to the city, as the skies cleared and a soft light bathed the streets. For Mia, the early hours held a mix of lingering fear and cautious hope. The memory of that fateful collision still pulsed in her heart, a reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life could be. As she prepared for another day of small struggles and fleeting dreams, her thoughts often wandered back to the gentleman who had offered kindness amid chaos. Alexander, too, began his day with a gentle echo of that encounter. In the structured world of board meetings and strategic decisions, his mind kept drifting to the unguarded look on Mia's face, the vulnerability that had touched him unexpectedly. He wondered about her life, the challenges she must face, and the strength it took simply to survive day after day. This reflection stirred something within him that he could no longer ignore. A few days after the accident, Alexander made a decision that surprised even himself. Rather than letting the incident fade into a forgotten, inconvenient blip in his schedule, he reached out. With a mix of careful consideration and sincere concern, he sent Mia a simple invitation, an offer to meet for coffee at a quiet, modest cafe known for its warm atmosphere and friendly service. His message was straightforward, a note of genuine interest in hearing her story, no business agenda attached, just a desire to share a moment of kindness. Mia was hesitant at first. The idea of sitting face-to-face with a man whose card she had clutched so nervously felt both unnerving and full of possibility. Unsure if she should take a risk, she considered the implications of accepting help from someone so different from her own world. But as the days passed, the memory of his soft, reassuring words and the sincerity in his eyes began to persuade her. The invitation was not a reminder of a chasm between wealth and want, but a sign of hope, a gentle lift, a possibility to be seen and heard. On a bright but cool morning, Mia found herself walking along a familiar route to the little cafe tucked away from the bustling center of the city. The cafe, modest yet inviting, had a reputation among locals as a haven for anyone in search of a quiet moment or a comforting cup of tea. As she approached, her heart fluttered with nerves. Every step echoed the uncertainty of a future she was only beginning to imagine. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with soft, instrumental music. A few early patrons chatted quietly in corners, each wrapped in their own thoughts. Amidst this gentle hum, Alexander was already seated at a small table by the window. He looked up from his newspaper as Mia entered, his face breaking into a warm, welcoming smile that seemed to erase the formal lines of his business attire. For a moment, the man in the expensive suit appeared not as a distant millionaire, but as someone who was simply kind and genuine, someone who cared enough to set aside his polished world for a few shared moments. "Hi, Mia," Alexander greeted with a calm, sincere tone that immediately put her at ease. "Thank you for coming." Mia smiled shyly and slid into the seat across from him. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied softly. Her eyes searched his face, trying to catch any sign of hidden motives. Instead, she saw nothing but a genuine interest and a spark of understanding that was unusual in her everyday interactions. As they sipped their coffee, the conversation began with polite small talk about the weather and mutual observations of the city's early stir. However, it soon deepened into more personal territories. Alexander, with deliberate gentleness, asked about Mia's life, the simple joys and struggles that, until now, she had carried alone. "I'm not used to people asking how I really feel," Mia confessed after a long pause. "Usually, everyone just rushes by without noticing. I work long hours at the diner and take care of my little brother when I can. Sometimes, it feels like life is just a series of hard days with no break." Listening intently, Alexander nodded, his expression softening further. "That sounds incredibly challenging," he said. "It must take a lot of courage to face each day the way you do. I've been so caught up in my own world, numbers, meetings, decisions, that I sometimes forget there are lives that require compassion and extra care." Mia's eyes glistened with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "I never thought someone like you, someone with so much, would care about what I go through," she murmured. "I used to imagine that wealth and success meant always having a smile on your face and never dealing with real troubles." Alexander looked at her, his voice carrying a hint of wistfulness. "I used to think that too," he admitted. "But success isn't just about the balance sheets or the grand gestures. It's about the little moments and the connections we make along the way." Yesterday, I was reminded that sometimes the most genuine interactions come from the most unexpected places. Their words fell between them like the soft patter of rain on a window pane, a sound both soothing and familiar. In this space of shared sincerity, the thick veils of class and circumstance that once divided them started to seem less formidable. They discovered that beneath the surface, they were both fighting similar battles. Alexander with the loneliness and pressures of a demanding life, and Mia with the daily uncertainties of survival. The conversation shifted as they began sharing memories of both hardship and hope. Alexander recounted a chapter from his youth, a time before the pressures of success had settled in, when he had dreamed of making a difference in the world rather than simply making a profit. He spoke about the mentors who had guided him, the lessons he had learned from failure, and the realization that the richest experiences often came from caring for others. Mia, in turn, told him about her childhood in a small neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and the way her mother had always managed to find beauty in the little things despite the struggles they faced. She spoke of small acts of kindness, a neighbor's warm smile on a cold day, a shared meal during times of scarcity, that had helped her hold on to hope even when things looked grim. As their conversation grew more intimate, the boundaries that once marked their separate worlds began to blur. Alexander's structured reality, filled with relentless schedules and high expectations, appeared far less intimidating when balanced with the raw honesty that Mia brought to the table. And Mia, often resigned to her fate, saw a reflection of her own resilience in a man who was not afraid to admit vulnerability. "Sometimes," Alexander said thoughtfully, "I look back and wonder if success is truly the measure of a person, or if it's the measure of how much you care for others. What do you think, Mia?" Mia paused, taking a sip of her coffee as she considered his question. "I think," she answered slowly, "that our hearts know what matters more than the labels on our lives. Rich or poor, we all need to feel seen and valued. I used to believe that life was just about surviving, getting through each day. But maybe there's a little more to it. Maybe a small act of kindness can change everything." The words resonated deeply with Alexander. In that moment, it became clear that this meeting was not just a byproduct of a random accident. It was a turning point for both of them. For Alexander, the encounter was a reminder that success was not defined solely by wealth, but by the human connections that enriched every life. For Mia, the meeting represented the possibility of a new chapter, a chance to see that help, understanding, and hope could come from the most unexpected sources. After hours of heartfelt conversation, the morning gave way to a soft afternoon glow. Outside the cafe, the world continued on its familiar path, cars gliding by, people hurrying to their next destination. Yet for Mia and Alexander, time seemed to slow, tethering them to the shared space of possibility and newfound friendship. As the meeting began to draw to a close, Alexander reached out once more, offering a gesture that was both simple and transformative. "Mia," he said with gentle conviction, "I don't expect anything from you, and I'm not trying to change your life overnight. But perhaps, when you feel ready, we could meet again. Not because of the accident, but because I believe there is so much more we can learn from each other." Mia smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the coffee's heat. "I would like that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with determination. "Maybe we can explore together what it means to live fully, despite everything." They exchanged numbers that day, not as a formality, but as a promise that the encounter was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge them to see the world through different eyes. Alexander's card, once a symbol of an unattainable world of wealth and power, had transformed into a doorway, a way to step into a realm where differences melted away and compassion reigned. Walking out of the cafe, Mia felt an unfamiliar lightness in her step. The city, once overwhelming with its sights and sounds, now seemed to whisper secret possibilities of second chances and honest connections. She tucked her phone into her pocket and looked up at the sky, noticing how the clouds had scattered into gentle patches of blue. It was as if the world, too, was offering her a quiet nod of approval. For Alexander, the walk back to his office was filled with reflections on the unexpected power of empathy. The cold efficiency of his earlier routine had given way to thoughts of potential change, not just in his life, but in the lives of those he encountered. The brief meeting had reminded him that every person carries a universe within, one that is filled with stories, dreams, and the silent battles of the everyday. Over the following days, each time their paths crossed, whether on the busy streets or in the soft glow of a cafe corner, Mia and Alexander built upon the fragile bridge they had formed. They learned that true understanding came not from what money could buy, but from the willingness to open up and listen to another's truth. With every small encounter, the gap between their two worlds shrank, replaced instead by the shared language of hope, respect, and genuine curiosity. Even as life continued its relentless rhythm, bills to pay for Mia and board meetings for Alexander, the memory of that encounter remained a beacon. Mia started to notice unexpected kindnesses in her everyday journey. A compliment from a neighbor, assistance at work when tasks piled up, a reassuring smile on a difficult day. Each moment was a small affirmation that she was not alone, that her story mattered. Likewise, Alexander found himself advocating for change within his own realm. He began to see that corporate decisions, often distant and impersonal, could have real impacts on real people. The lessons learned that day over coffee nudged him toward a different way of thinking, one that balanced profit with responsibility, success with compassion. In quiet meetings and during late nights spent poring over reports, he would pause and think, how can we make a difference today? And in these quiet moments, he would remember the hopeful eyes of a young woman who had dared to let him see the world beyond his own. As the day drew to a close that week, both Mia and Alexander looked back on the serendipity that had brought them together. What began as an unfortunate accident had blossomed into a quiet revolution of the heart, a reminder that even in the chaos of everyday life, a single encounter could rewrite the future. In their differing worlds, they had found common ground, a shared belief that everyone, regardless of their background, deserved a chance to be seen, valued, and supported. In this delicate dance of interactions, the notion of a poor girl and a millionaire CEO began to lose its meaning. It was not the money in one's bank account or the title on a business card that defined the worth of a person, but the capacity to love, to empathize, and to be present for one another. In the simple act of sharing coffee and conversation, Mia and Alexander had taken the first steps on a journey that promised to be as unpredictable as it was transformative. In the days following their initial encounters, both Mia and Alexander felt a subtle shift stirring beneath the surface. Their meetings, planned or coincidental, became more frequent. Each conversation revealed more of who they truly were, beyond the labels of poor girl and millionaire CEO. There came a time when the quiet glow of shared coffee breaks and evening walks provided just the right setting for unguarded moments of honesty. For Mia, the past was a tapestry of both warmth and pain, a mix of childhood memories filled with love and harsh lessons born from hardship. Every free moment, when the bustle of the street faded into a quiet lull, she thought back to her early years in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. In those days, laughter would echo in the narrow lanes and neighbors would share what little they had. Yet, as life grew more complicated, financial worries and unexpected tragedies began to shadow those memories. Mia recalled how her mother, a strong and determined woman, would sing lullabies and tell stories of faraway places where dreams were never too big. Despite the poverty that clung to them, her mother always had a way of finding beauty in the simplest things: a shared meal, a kind word, or even the glow of a sunrise peeking over a row of run-down houses. This tender resilience had shaped Mia's character, instilling in her the unyielding belief that even in the harshest of circumstances, hope could still flourish. On a cool, breezy afternoon a few weeks after their first meeting, Mia found herself sitting on a worn bench in a small park near her apartment. The park had been a sanctuary for her growing up, a place where she could momentarily forget the burdens of adulthood. That day, as the golden hues of sunset bathed the trees, memories of her past rushed forward. She remembered her mother's gentle smile, the bittersweet moments spent watching the seasons change, and the silent promises that life held something better just around the corner. In these moments of recollection, she also acknowledged the scars left by loss and hardship, scars that she had learned to carry with quiet dignity. As the cool evening deepened her introspection, a quiet buzz at her phone brought her back to the present. It was a message from Alexander, a simple note asking if she would join him for a walk along a nearby river that wound through the city. Uncertain, but moved by a longing to share more, she agreed. On the following day, under an overcast sky, Mia and Alexander met at the riverbank. The river, with its slow, rhythmic flow, seemed to carry the weight of time and whispered secrets in a language only nature could explain. The gentle lapping of water against the bank provided a soothing soundtrack to the conversation that was about to unfold. Sometimes, Alexander began softly as they strolled side by side on a narrow, pebble-lined path. I feel like I've lived many lives in one. Success, boardroom decisions, endless meetings, but none of it has ever filled the emptiness that sometimes creeps in when I'm alone. His gaze wandered across the flowing water before he continued. I want to share a part of that life with you. The part that is not about profits, but about memories and regrets. Mia listened carefully, her heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. I know what it's like to have a past that follows you, she said, her voice carrying the weight of years filled with unspoken hardships. I grew up in a place where every smile was earned, and every day was a struggle. But sometimes, I wonder if there was a different path that I missed out on, one where I could have laughed louder, loved harder, and perhaps lived just a little bit freer. Alexander stopped walking and looked at her, as if he could see the hidden layers of pain and hope woven together in her words. It sounds like you have many chapters in your story that you haven't yet shared. I'd like to know them, if you're willing. I believe that understanding what has brought us here is part of what can shape who we become. Mia hesitated, then took a deep breath. I was only a child when things started to change. My father left long before I could understand why, and my mother had to take on the world's burdens by herself. There were nights when we sat together in our tiny living room, huddled against the cold, and she told me that every storm eventually passes. Even though we didn't have much, she believed that kindness could change the world, even ours. Her eyes began to glisten as she recalled those moments, and Alexander felt the urge to reach out, to show support without interrupting her flow. I'm sorry you had to go through all that, he said softly, his voice sincere. It takes immense strength to rise above circumstances like that, and you carry that strength with you every day. As they continued along the river, Alexander, too, began to open up about the other side of his world, a world of wealth and responsibility that, despite its advantages, often left him feeling empty. For years, I've lived under the weight of expectations, he said, pausing on a small footbridge. I was expected to make decisions not out of my own will, but in the interest of shareholders and the bottom line. I was raised to believe that emotions were a luxury, a distraction from the business at hand. Yet, here I am, sharing with you that there are days when I miss the simplicity of genuine, human connection. He described how his childhood had been a contrast to the polished image he now projected, a life filled with strict routines, isolation, and the sense that no matter how much he achieved, something essential was missing. There was a time, he admitted with a quiet vulnerability, when I had friends and dreams just like everyone else. But as I climbed the ladder of success, I lost sight of the people who mattered, lost myself in the process. Mia squeezed his hand gently as they paused by a tree whose branches were bare, yet dignified against the twilight sky. I believe that sometimes the weight of success is more about losing parts of ourselves than gaining anything at all, she said. You've discovered that, haven't you? Alexander nodded slowly, feeling the truth in her words. I have, he said, and it scares me, because I'm not sure how to go back. But maybe there's a way to start over, slowly, one step at a time. Their walk turned into a quiet session of shared admission and healing. The river's steady flow reminded them that life, despite its turbulence, had a rhythm, a promise that every moment was a chance for renewal. In these moments, it wasn't about the polished facades or societal positions. It was about being real, embracing imperfections, and understanding that our scars are a testament to the battles we have fought and the lessons learned. Mia recounted the small miracles that had punctuated her childhood, the secret hiding spots behind old brick walls, the way her mother's laughter lit up the dark corners of their home, and the day when a stranger, with nothing more than a smile, made her feel seen. Even in those hard times, she said, I learned that there's beauty in every broken piece of our past. It taught me to cherish the little moments, to believe in the possibility of change. Alexander, his eyes fixed on the river as if reading an ancient story, reflected on those same ideas. I want to believe that change is possible, he whispered. That sometimes a mistake, an accident, can be the spark that ignites something far greater than the sum of our past regrets. His voice trailed off, a mixture of hope and uncertainty mingling in the cool evening air. For both of them, the conversation was a profound turning point, a declaration that understanding their past was not a sign of weakness, but a necessary step towards finding a future where the heart's truth was not overshadowed by the roles society imposed. By sharing the burdens of their histories, they discovered that vulnerability was not a flaw, but a unique kind of strength that could bridge worlds. As dusk deepened into night, Mia and Alexander found themselves on a quiet bench overlooking the river. The stars began to appear, shy at first, then gradually bold as the sky darkened. In that silence, they sat together, not as saviors or benefactors, but as two souls gradually learning to trust one another. Alexander took a deep breath before continuing. I want you to know something that few have ever seen, he said slowly. Before I was the CEO, I was just a boy who loved art, who dreamed of painting the world in colors of hope. There were days when I'd steal moments to watch the sunset and sketch it in a small notebook. But somewhere along the way, I lost that part of me. I thought success meant leaving those dreams behind, but now I wonder if I was wrong. Mia's eyes widened, touched by the unexpected confession. I had no idea, she murmured softly. It sounds like you had a whole world of dreams that got buried under duty and expectation. Yes, Alexander said, his voice thick with unshed emotion. It hurts to think about it sometimes. The idea that I sacrificed a piece of myself for a title and for a legacy that isn't even mine anymore. He paused, glancing at Mia as if seeking reassurance. I don't expect forgiveness for that choice, only that you see the man behind the success, with all his mistakes and hopes. Moved by his honesty, Mia reached out and rested her hand on his. We all carry baggage, she said gently. I have my own secrets, my own losses that I hide behind a brave face. But every time I share even a little piece of my past, I feel lighter, as if the burden is shared. Maybe that's what makes us human, that we are all, in one way or another, incomplete works of art, searching for the courage to be whole. Their words melded with the nocturnal murmur of the city, creating an intimate space far removed from the busy, judgmental world outside. In that moment, secrets ceased to be burdens and instead became the very threads that wove their souls closer together. A bond formed not through status or wealth, but by the shared understanding of life's fragility and beauty. As they finally stood to leave, the cool night air seemed to carry away some of the heaviness that had characterized their individual journeys. Mia smiled softly, her heart filled with cautious hope. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said. "I feel like I understand you a bit more now, and I hope you see that I'm no stranger to the fight to hold on to my dreams either." Alexander's reply was a simple nod, his eyes glistening with gratitude and an unspoken promise to nurture the connection they had begun to forge. "I believe that every secret shared is a promise that we're not alone," he said quietly. "Tonight, we learn that our pasts do not define us. They simply guide us towards who we can become, together." As they parted ways beneath the gentle glow of streetlights, both felt an undeniable shift in their inner worlds. The secrets they had revealed, the vulnerabilities they had embraced, were not just reflections of painful histories. They were the very seeds of a transformation that could lead them to a brighter, more honest tomorrow. The early hours of a spring morning arrived with an air of both possibility and tension. For several days, Mia and Alexander had been meeting frequently, their conversations deepening their connection and slowly bridging the gap between two very different worlds. Yet beneath the gentle progression of newfound friendship, unforeseen challenges lay in wait. On this particular day, the city woke to news that would soon send shockwaves through both of their lives. A major financial setback at Alexander's company sparked whispers of scandal among investors and within the halls of the corporate world. Rumors circulated of a costly miscalculation, one that could potentially tarnish the reputation he had spent years building. The burden of responsibility now pressed on him more heavily than ever, and a sense of dread began to infect his every thought. For Alexander, who had already begun questioning the sacrifices demanded by his success, the incident felt like the tipping point in his carefully balanced life. His phone rang relentlessly with urgent calls from business partners and anxious shareholders. As the crisis unfolded, his office became a frantic scene of numbers, negotiations, and pressure that made him feel isolated in a sea of expectations. In stark contrast, Mia was unaware of the storm gathering in Alexander's corporate sphere. Her days continued in a rhythm of familiar struggles, juggling multiple shifts and attending to the small needs of her family. However, the recent encounters with Alexander had left a lingering warmth in her heart, a promise of a change in her life that she had never dared to dream possible. That afternoon, just as the news of the company's trouble was making headlines, Mia received an unexpected call on her phone. The number on the display was unfamiliar, yet something in its tone, gentle, yet insistent, made her pause before answering. When she picked up, a voice quietly said, "Mia, it's Alexander. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the park near your neighborhood?" His voice carried an urgency and a depth of emotion that immediately made her heart race. Unsure but determined, Mia agreed. Stepping out into the fading light of the day, she hurriedly made her way to the quiet park where she often found solace. The park's familiar paths and the simple beauty of nature had always offered her a brief escape from her burdens. Today, however, as she waited on a secluded bench beneath an old oak tree, her thoughts were tangled with worry, both for herself and for the man who had begun to mean so much. Meanwhile, Alexander had left the office in haste. The chaos of corporate demands had overwhelmed him, and the pressure to manage the fallout from the financial crisis made it impossible to keep up the polished demeanor he was accustomed to. In the privacy of the park, away from the stifling fluorescent lights of boardrooms and the endless barrage of urgent emails, he felt both vulnerable and exposed. As Mia spotted him emerging from a cluster of trees, she noticed how different he looked. No longer the composed businessman, but a man whose eyes were clouded with worry and regret. He sat beside her in silence for several minutes, listening to the distant hum of city traffic and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Finally, Alexander cleared his throat, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and honesty. I'm sorry, Mia, he began softly. Today was a disaster at work. Something I did, or failed to do, triggered a cascade of problems that might threaten everything I've worked for. I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. The weight in his words was palpable. Mia reached out, her hand trembling as it found his. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice quiet yet filled with a sincere empathy. I know nothing can be as terrible as it seems in those grand offices of yours, but I can feel the pain in your voice. What can I do? Alexander's eyes glistened with a sorrow that was not just for himself, but for all the pieces of his life that were at risk. I feel like I'm losing control, he confessed. My company, the very thing that defines me, might crumble under the pressure of this mistake. I've spent so much time trying to prove my worth, only to be reminded that I'm still human, that I can fail. And now it's all crashing down. Mia squeezed his hand gently, words of comfort struggling to form. I understand what it means to feel like your world is falling apart, she said softly. I've had moments when every day felt like a battle for survival, when one small setback was enough to shatter everything. I know it seems unbearable right now, but sometimes, when we're at our lowest, we find the strength to rebuild. As the tension of the moment subsided into a quiet, contemplative sadness, Alexander began to share more than just the surface of his corporate crisis. He talked about the endless nights he'd spent questioning if the sacrifices he made were worth the cost. The facade of success, the wealth, the accolades, even the control, felt increasingly hollow when faced with personal failure. In those moments, the weight of expectation and the fear of letting down everyone who relied on him were almost too much to bear. Mia listened intently, drawing upon the empathy that had blossomed from their earlier conversations. Although her world was very different, she understood the sting of failure and the searing dread of uncertainty. It doesn't mean you're not strong, she said, her voice steady despite the underlying emotion. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about having the courage to get up after you do. And I believe you have that strength, even if you can't see it right now. The confession hung in the air, a bond forming through shared vulnerability. For Alexander, Mia's words were like a lifeline, a reminder that even when the world seemed to collapse around him, there was still someone who believed in his ability to overcome. Yet, as the reality of his situation pressed in, he knew that not every wound could be healed with hope alone. I'm scared, Mia, he admitted, his voice nearly a whisper. Scared that this failure might end not only my career, but also our chance at something real, something that goes beyond the expectations of society. I don't want to be defined solely by this catastrophe, or by the persona I've built to hide my doubts. Mia's grip tightened in gentle reassurance. You are not defined by your failures, she said firmly. They are just parts of your journey. And if this crisis forces you to confront the truth about who you are, beyond the title and the responsibilities, then maybe it's a painful but necessary turning point. Sometimes the harshest moments lead us to rediscover our most authentic selves. Their conversation lingered on the theme of reinvention and resilience. As the park's shadows lengthened with the onset of dusk, Alexander faced a crucial decision. In the coming days, he would have to decide whether to double down on the conventional ways that had led to his current predicament, or to take a risk, one that involved acknowledging the very vulnerabilities he had fought so hard to hide. For Mia, the discussion opened up the possibility that life might reward the honest acceptance of one's imperfections. The prospect of intertwining her fate with someone whose life was built on glamour and pressure was daunting. Yet, in that moment, she recognized that the sincerity in Alexander's eyes and words presented an opportunity for both of them to change their paths, and perhaps even inspire change in each other. Alexander looked at Mia, and in her steady gaze, he saw the courage to rise again. I've been offered a way out, he continued after a long, pensive pause. My board has given me an ultimatum. I either implement drastic measures to fix the crisis, measures that could hurt employees and damage communities. Or I step down, resigning from the role that has consumed my identity for so long. It's not just a professional decision, it's a moral one. The air between them grew thick with the gravity of the choice. Alexander's eyes searched Mia's, seeking a hint of her opinion, a sign of encouragement. If I resign, he said slowly, I could start over. I could use my resources to help others, people like you, rather than chasing profits at any cost. But I'm terrified of what that means. I've built my life and my reputation on perseverance in the corporate arena. Letting go of that, it feels like losing a part of who I am. Mia's heart ached at the sight of his torment, yet she saw the possibility in his confession. Sometimes, the hardest choices lead us to where we truly belong, she replied softly. It isn't a loss if you gain something more meaningful, if you find a way to live in harmony with your true values. You don't have to define yourself solely by your job or your title. You are a person with dreams and a capacity for goodness. And maybe, in letting go, you can discover a life that feels more complete. Tears welled in Alexander's eyes as the sincerity of her words sank in. The crisis had forced him to stand at a crossroads, where each path bore consequences not only for his career, but for his soul. His heart pounded with the realization that the decision he would make might change the course of his entire life, and perhaps even shape the future of their growing bond. That night, after parting ways at the park with the promise to meet again soon, Alexander found himself alone in the quiet of his upscale apartment. The sterile luxury of his surroundings, once a symbol of success, now felt like a gilded cage built on compromises and unfulfilled dreams. He stared out at the city lights, pondering the decision before him. In his solitude, the memories of Mia's gentle encouragement echoed in his mind. He thought about the moments when they had shared dreams, vulnerabilities, and the simple truth that life's value was measured not by wealth or titles, but by compassion and authenticity. Alexander knew that the board's ultimatum, as crushing as it might seem, held the potential to liberate him if he had the courage to accept it. The following morning, with a resolve born from both desperation and hope, Alexander made his choice. He would resign from his post as CEO and embrace a new chapter, one that promised to redefine his purpose. It wasn't an easy decision, one that carried risks and uncertainties, but in that daring leap, he felt a newfound liberation, a chance to realign his values with his actions. Before the weight of the day's earlier crisis could be fully swallowed by the corporate storms, Alexander reached out to Mia once again. With a mix of apprehension and determination in his voice, he said, Mia, I've made a decision. I'm going to step down from my position. I want to create a future that's not defined by profit margins or relentless expectations. I hope you'll continue to walk this path with me as I learn to build something more real, something that honors both of our struggles. Mia listened, her heart swelling with both relief and an overwhelming empathy that transcended the boundaries of class and circumstance. I'm with you, Alexander, she replied simply, her voice steady as she embraced the hope of a brighter tomorrow. This isn't just your journey, it's our journey. And I believe that together we can create something that makes a difference. In that moment, as the sun began to rise on a new day, Mia and Alexander's paths intertwined even further. The tipping point had arrived, one that promised challenges and uncertainties, but also the possibility of a profound transformation that defied the conventional narratives of wealth, success, and hardship. After the crisis that rocked the foundations of his corporate world, Alexander found that each new day carried a chance to redefine who he was. Resigning from his high-powered job had come with a cascade of consequences: public scrutiny, financial uncertainties, and the unsettling feeling of losing a familiar identity. Yet, deep within, he sensed that this was a needed transformation. Determined to rebuild his life based on honesty and compassion, Alexander resolved to step away from the cold, impersonal metrics of success and towards a path where human connection came first. During the first few days following his decision, Alexander dedicated himself to introspection. He spent long hours at the quiet lakeside in a local park, taking out a dusty journal he once used during his childhood. There, he began to map out his dreams for a future not defined by board meetings or profit margins, but by meaningful projects that could create a difference in the lives of others. especially for those who, like Mia, had long been overlooked by society. Mia, too, sensed a subtle change. The young woman who once navigated the crowded streets with a heart burdened by daily survival began to notice a soft unfolding of possibility. Every time her phone chimed with a message or call from Alexander, it wasn't just a reminder of the accident that had upended her world. It was a signal of hope, a gentle reminder that small acts of kindness could sometimes lead to breathtaking change. A few weeks into his new life, Alexander decided to transform his ideas into action. He reached out to community leaders and local organizations that focused on economic and social empowerment in underserved neighborhoods. In a series of careful meetings, he began drafting plans for a community center, an initiative aimed at providing training, education, and support to those struggling to break the cycle of poverty. In one of these meetings, however, he found himself recalling Mia's own story, a story of resilience and hope forged in quiet determination. On a clear Thursday morning, as the city bustled with its blend of deadlines and dreams, Alexander invited Mia to join him at a community forum hosted by one of the local nonprofit organizations. His invitation was simple: come share your views and, if you wished, help shape a project that aimed to empower people like her. Mia was initially overwhelmed by the prospect of stepping into a room filled with professionals and community activists. The idea of publicly sharing her story and insights took great courage, but the warmth in Alexander's invitation and his insistence that her perspective was not only valuable but essential sparked a determination she hadn't felt before. Accepting his offer, Mia prepared to venture beyond the confines of her daily struggle into a realm where her voice might contribute to something larger. At the forum, voices mingled with ideas. There were professionals discussing funding, activists outlining the needs of their communities, and individuals sharing personal journeys of overcoming adversity. Amid this mosaic of determination and hope, Mia's words, uncomplicated and sincere, resonated with many. She spoke of the power of small kindnesses, the overlooked potential in every underdog, and the belief that no one was too broken to mend with support from others. Her account of life's daily battles was met with nods and quiet affirmations. In that room, she was no longer just a poor girl, but a valued contributor whose insight bridged the gap between economic realities and human potential. Alexander watched from the sidelines, proud and quietly emotional, as Mia's gentle strength shone through. In that moment, the dividing line between their worlds blurred further. Wealth and status receded into irrelevance compared to the urgency and passion of change. Their partnership was no longer just about healing individual wounds. It had grown into a collective, community-centered effort to redraw social boundaries with empathy and action. As the community center project took shape, Mia and Alexander found themselves working side by side over weeks filled with planning sessions, late-night brainstorming meetings, and visits to local neighborhoods to gather feedback. Their interactions blossomed in an environment that fostered open communication and mutual respect. The project wasn't without challenges. Budget constraints, bureaucratic delays, and differing opinions among stakeholders sometimes threatened to stall progress. However, each obstacle was met with determination, and the knowledge that their bond, built on authenticity and shared values, provided both strength and inspiration. One rainy evening, after an exhausting day of negotiations and paperwork at a local municipal office, Mia and Alexander took a moment to pause inside a humble community hall. The flickering fluorescent lights and quiet hum of a pending project created an atmosphere that was intimate yet charged with possibility. "Mia," Alexander began softly, the fatigue in his voice mingling with genuine admiration. "When I first resigned, I wondered if I had made an irreversible mistake. But every time I see the hope in the eyes of someone who might benefit from our work, and every time I hear your story, I realize I found something much more valuable than any corporate title or bank balance. I found purpose." Her eyes shone with quiet warmth. "And you've shown me that even when life feels like an endless struggle, there's room for hope and change. I never imagined that my experiences, my pain, could mean something to someone. But now, I see that our differences can build something beautiful rather than tear us apart." In that exchange, the gravity of their new bond crystallized. They recognized that their worlds, once separated by societal expectations and material differences, were colliding not in conflict, but in a harmonious effort to uplift others. Their shared moments of laughter over a cup of modest coffee, the long discussions about dreams lost and found, and the collective push toward a common goal laid the foundation for a relationship that extended beyond the conventional frameworks of romance and class. Over the following months, the project began to attract local attention and support. Volunteers signed up enthusiastically, community leaders offered their resources, and a modest grant made its way into the project's coffers. Each small victory was a testament to the power of unlikely alliances, proof that when people set aside their differences and come together with genuine care, transformation is possible. Alexander and Mia celebrated these wins not with extravagant parties or grand gestures, but with simple moments of reflection, sharing meals in the community center's modest kitchen, reviewing progress reports over tea at a battered table, and laughing together when unexpected mishaps disrupted a perfectly well-laid plan. These moments, tender in their simplicity, wove a tapestry of resilience, proving that even in the aftermath of loss and regret, beauty could be found in new beginnings. Their relationship, too, evolved in these shared spaces. What began as cautious interactions blossomed into a deep friendship built on trust, empathy, and mutual aspirations. The office hallways and boardrooms of Alexander's past were replaced by open community spaces and vibrant discussions around round tables. Their eyes no longer dwelled on the differences in their backgrounds. Instead, they focused on the common humanity that united them. Mia found herself increasingly comfortable in situations where she had once felt intimidated. By sharing her insights during meetings and offering practical suggestions rooted in her lived reality, she became a bridge between the community's needs and the lofty ideas proposed by professionals. Alexander, who had once lived in a world defined by numbers and cold logic, began to embrace the soft power of compassion and grassroots change. His leadership transformed from top-down commands to collaborative efforts, as he learned to listen and empower others rather than dictate outcomes. Despite the promising progress, both Mia and Alexander were acutely aware that the road ahead would not always be smooth. Social change was often a slow, unpredictable journey, riddled with setbacks, doubts, and moments when old insecurities resurfaced. There were nights when Alexander would lie awake, haunted by the fear of failure, and mornings when Mia questioned whether her efforts would ever be enough to rewrite the narrative of her community's hardships. In one particularly challenging week, after a proposal they had worked tirelessly on was met with unexpected bureaucratic resistance, both felt the sting of disappointment. The community center's future, which had once seemed within reach, now hung in a balance threatened by endless red tape. It was during these trying times that the unlikely bond between them became even more critical, a source of strength when external pressures made their vision seem distant. One cold evening, as a harsh wind rattled the windows of the nearly empty community hall, Alexander found Mia sitting alone on a wooden bench near the entrance. Her eyes, usually so full of determination, seemed clouded with the weight of doubt. Quietly, he sat beside her, the silence offering comfort more than any words could. "Mia, sometimes I wonder if we're too different from the world we're trying to change," he said gently. "But then I look at you, and I see not just the struggles of the past, but the strength and wisdom that comes from them. You remind me that real change comes from embracing our challenges, not running away from them." Her gaze met his, a silent conversation unfolding in the space between shared vulnerability and steadfast hope. "I'm scared too," Mia admitted. "But maybe it's in that fear that we find the courage to take the next step. Together, we're not defined by what we've lost or what we lack. We're defined by what we have, the drive to make things better." And so, in those moments of raw honesty, the unlikely bond between a poor girl and a former millionaire solidified into something unbreakable. It was a bond that celebrated their individual journeys while weaving them into a shared tapestry of hope, resilience, and the belief that every small act of kindness, every shared dream, could someday changed the course of their lives and the lives of those around them. As the community center project continued to gain momentum, the achievements along the way served as daily affirmations for both Mia and Alexander. Their collaboration wasn't just about building a physical space. It was about constructing a community built on trust, shared responsibility, and love for one another. Every success, no matter how small, reminded them that their bond had the power to transform not only their own lives, but also the lives of people who had long been sidelined by society. Walking out of a meeting one sunny afternoon, Alexander paused on the steps of the community center and looked out over a small group of children laughing and playing in the freshly cleaned yard. He found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, the mistakes, the heartbreak, and the unexpected kindness that, step by step, had led him to this moment of rebirth. In that reflective pause, he knew that his future would be crafted not by the rigid parameters of his old life, but by the unpredictable, messy, and beautiful tapestry of human connection. Mia, on her part, felt a quiet pride every time she saw community members eagerly participating in a workshop or a group discussion organized within the center's modest walls. She remembered the days when she thought her voice was too small to make a difference. Now, she knew that even the quietest voice could spark a revolution of hope when joined with others who believed in a better tomorrow. Together, through shared victories and the inevitable setbacks, Mia and Alexander had learned that true strength came from leaning on one another. They had grown from an unlikely bond forged by circumstance into a partnership that was as much about healing old wounds as it was about building new dreams. Their journey, marked by heartfelt conversations, sleepless nights, and quiet moments of triumph, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of compassion. Just as the community center began to radiate hope throughout the neighborhood, a ripple of unexpected events threatened to undo months of progress. The project had become a beacon for those struggling to break free from poverty and isolation, but every new beginning sometimes attracts challenges from the past and unforeseen complications. For Mia and Alexander, a sense of cautious optimism had replaced earlier apprehensions. Their work had nurtured an unbreakable bond, a daily testament to shared purpose and resilience. However, fate often has a way of reminding us that change is rarely linear. One rainy afternoon, as the community center bustled with volunteers and local residents, a well-dressed stranger arrived unannounced at the center's modest front desk. The visitor introduced herself as Veronica, a seasoned public relations consultant whose reputation for managing high-profile crises preceded her. With a calm yet assertive manner, she explained that she had been sent by Alexander's former company to assess any potential damages that might affect his previous business dealings. Veronica's presence stirred whispers among the staff and volunteers. Some of them recalled Alexander with admiration for his brave decision to leave the corporate world in favor of a more authentic life. Others wondered whether his past success, or the scandal that had triggered his resignation, would someday cast a shadow on the new project. Alexander, who had been in a meeting with community leaders, was suddenly thrust into a conflict he had hoped to leave behind. His mind raced with memories of boardroom battles and polished facades. Now, confronted by a representative of a world he was trying to transcend, he felt the unsettling grip of a past he had long tried to leave behind. Back at the community center, Mia sensed the rising tension immediately. Veronica's questions were pointed and clinical, inquiring about financial documents, project approvals, and the extent of any liabilities carried over from Alexander's past endeavors. Her tone was neither sympathetic nor curious. It was more like an audit, a reminder that hidden debts and unresolved controversies sometimes lurk beneath even the most promising new beginnings. During a quiet moment away from the gathering, Mia found Alexander alone in his office, staring at a series of documents with dark circles under his eyes. The gravity of the situation was written all over him, and she could see the turmoil as he wrestled with the past and questioned if his decision to walk away from his former life was enough to protect his new dream. "Alexander," Mia said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "What's happening? You look as if the world is closing in on you again." He turned his eyes toward her, a mixture of regret, fear, and determination glistening beneath the surface. "It seems my past has found a way to creep back into my life," he confessed. "Veronica is here to assess how much of my corporate history might tarnish what we're building. I never imagined that stepping away from that world would come at such a cost." Mia squeezed his hand gently. "You've already started a new chapter," she reminded him. "Your passion here is real, and the people around you believe in it. We'll face this twist together." Veronica's investigation soon revealed more than just standard financial discrepancies. It uncovered irregularities in some old contracts and investments that implicated Alexander in decisions made before he changed his course. Word began to circulate, both within the community center and in local circles, that perhaps the scandal Alexander had once escaped was never fully resolved. Suddenly, donors and volunteers started to hesitate. Some local supporters questioned the integrity of the project. Suspicion grew that the community center, despite its mission of hope and renewal, might be a shell built upon a foundation of past mistakes. The budding trust that Mia and Alexander had so carefully cultivated now teetered on the edge of uncertainty. At the center's weekly meeting, tension simmered as community members expressed their concerns. A longtime volunteer, Mr. Johnson, voiced the growing anxiety. "We came here for a new beginning. But if our project is tied to old, unresolved issues, what chance do we have of truly moving forward?" Alexander stood before them, the weight of responsibility evident in every word. "I understand your fears," he said, his voice resolute yet tinged with vulnerability. "I cannot change what has happened in the past, but I promise you, and I promise myself, that I will work with complete transparency to resolve these issues. Our focus is on building a future where every person here can find hope and strength." Yet even as he spoke, Alexander could feel the whispers of doubt echoing in his mind. The familiar pressures of his old world were once again tugging at him, urging him to retreat to the comfortable confines of corporate calculations and control rather than face the uncertain consequences of his newfound passion. Complicating the crisis further, one of Alexander's closest advisors from his former life, David, a man who had once shared his vision for corporate success, appeared at the community center. David, whose presence stirred bitter memories of greed and ambition, challenged Alexander publicly. "You can't just walk away from your legacy and expect the world to forgive you," he declared during a heated discussion with community members. "Your past decisions were not made lightly, and there will be repercussions." Mia watched the exchange with a heavy heart. It wasn't just the reputation of the community center at stake. It was Alexander's soul. The man she had come to know was being torn apart by an external storm that threatened to undermine everything he had built. The betrayal felt twofold. On one level, it was the sting of old ties pulling him back to a world he had rejected. On another, it was the shock that someone he had once trusted could now be an adversary in the pursuit of a better future. Veronica's presence, David's accusations, and the rising doubts among the community members created a maelstrom of external pressures. Alexander's internal resolve wavered as he was forced to confront the possibility that, despite his intentions, he might never fully escape the shadow of his former life. That night, after the meeting had dispersed into uneasy silence and unresolved arguments, Alexander and Mia found themselves alone in the quiet backroom of the community. The tension in the air was almost tangible, a mixture of disappointment, fear, and the raw pain of feeling betrayed by fate. Alexander's voice broke as he confessed, "I'm scared, Mia. I'm afraid that no matter how hard I try to start over, these ghosts will always be with me. They remind me that I can't outrun the mistakes I've made. And now, with David's words and Veronica's investigation, I feel like I'm losing everything I've worked for." Mia reached across and took his hand firmly, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "Every one of us has a past," she said, "and no matter how hard we try, it will always be a part of who we are. But it doesn't have to define you, nor does it have to define what we're building here. This center, our work, it stands for a future that isn't ruled by past mistakes. It's built by every act of kindness, every moment of courage, and every time someone chooses to believe in hope rather than despair." Alexander's eyes shimmered with a mixture of gratitude and lingering sorrow. "I want to believe that too. I want to trust that our work here can overcome the scars of my past. I need to fight not only for the community center, but for the future that I want for us all." They held on to each other in that quiet room, drawing strength from the connection they had built, realizing that even in the midst of betrayal and uncertainty, the genuine bond between them could be the anchor needed to ride out the storm. The next morning brought the promise of resolution, or at least the beginning of a long, hard-fought battle. Alexander, now resolute despite the mounting pressures, called a special meeting with all the stakeholders of the community center. In the face of doubts and fears, he committed to full accountability, offering to publicly address every irregularity from his past with transparency and a promise to make amends. "I stand before you not as a perfect man, but as someone who is trying to do better," he declared, his eyes scanning the room filled with skeptical, hopeful, and wary faces. "Our journey is not without its bumps. I have made mistakes, and I continue to face the consequences. But I ask you to trust in our mission, to trust that every day we work together, we can overcome these challenges and build something lasting." The room fell silent as his words echoed. Slowly, one by one, community members began to nod, their expressions softening with cautious optimism. It wasn't a complete victory, and many questions still hung in the air. But in that moment, a collective decision was made, a decision to face the twists of fate together rather than allow fear to drive them apart. Later that day, as the community center cleared and the storm of controversy began to subside into a more manageable murmur, Mia and Alexander stepped out together into a world that felt simultaneously fragile and filled with possibility. They knew the path ahead would be steep, fraught with more challenges than easy victories. Yet, they also realized that each trial, each twist of fate, was a chance to prove that genuine change was possible when driven by compassion, transparency, and unwavering courage. Mia squeezed Alexander's hand as they walked along a quiet street, the soft light of dusk enveloping them. "We'll rebuild," she whispered. "Not just the trust in us, but the promise of a future where our past does not dictate our worth." Alexander nodded, the weight of his past mingling with a flicker of hope for the future. "Together, we'll find a way to rewrite the narrative," he replied, one honest step at a time. The storm of controversy had slowly begun to recede. In the wake of the revelations and public scrutiny, Mia and Alexander poured every ounce of energy into reaffirming their commitment to each other and to the dream they had built together. The community center, once shaken by doubts and old betrayals, had become a symbol of resilience and the transformative power of truth. In the quiet moments of early morning, long after the heated discussions and tense meetings had quieted, Alexander would sit by the window of the center and sketch out plans for a better future. Every line on his notepad represented a promise, one to uphold transparency, mend old wounds, and ensure that the community's trust would be earned with honest action rather than empty assurances. Mia, standing at the heart of the center, organized workshops, assisted in the development of new programs, and shared her story with anyone who would listen. She became a living example that our past does not determine our future. With every smile and every small success in the center, the community found renewed hope that their struggles were acknowledged, and that real change was possible when people came together. Determined to leave the ghosts of his corporate past behind, Alexander took several bold steps. He held public forums where every question was welcomed and where he addressed the difficulties head-on. With Mia by his side, he explained the mistakes of the past, clarified the measures taken to resolve every irregularity, and outlined a clear vision for a future that centered on ethical accountability and community empowerment. These forums, initially met with skepticism, gradually grew into inspiring gatherings. People shared their own journeys of struggle and healing, and together they created an environment where no secret was too heavy to overcome and no mistake was too big to forgive. Alexander's willingness to be vulnerable, not only about his failures, but about his determination to learn and evolve, rekindled trust among those who had doubted him. Mia found strength in speaking her truth as well. Her heartfelt accounts of growing up with unspoken hardships, yet discovering the power of small acts of kindness, encouraged others to see that every person carried a unique story worth celebrating. Her courage and authenticity bridged the gap between the often ignored shadows of poverty and the bright lights of opportunity. As the community center began to flourish, a new chapter opened, not just for the center, but for everyone involved. The energy in the center was contagious. Individuals who had once felt isolated found a place to belong, to share, and to aspire for a brighter tomorrow. Under the collaborative leadership of Mia and Alexander, the center evolved beyond a physical space into a symbol of hope, a tangible demonstration that everyone, regardless of their background, has the power to change their story. Through continuous education programs, creative arts workshops, and support groups, the community was now equipped to face life's challenges with confidence and resilience. One crisp morning, during a celebration of the center's first anniversary, the community gathered for a simple yet powerful announcement. Alexander, standing before a humble stage decorated with local art, addressed the crowd with heartfelt determination. "Today," he said, "we celebrate not just the success of our community center, but the triumph of our collective spirit. Every challenge we overcame, every doubt we faced, has made us stronger and more united than ever." Mia's eyes shone as she added, "We've learned that our past doesn't define us. It is the choices we make every day, the small acts of kindness, and the courage to look forward that pave the way for a better future. Let this center be a home for every dreamer and every fighter." The applause that followed was not just for the project or the leaders. It was for every individual who had played a part in rewriting their lives, proving that redemption was not only possible, but within reach when hearts and minds aligned in a journey of healing. In the weeks and months that followed, the community center continued to thrive. With Mia and Alexander at the helm, the center expanded its programs, reaching out to neighboring areas and inspiring similar initiatives in other parts of the city. Their personal transformation became a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that even when fate deals harsh blows, the power of compassion and truth can lead to redemption. Both Mia and Alexander knew that challenges would always come, but now they approached them with a sense of renewed purpose and deep understanding. Their journey, from the stark collision of two worlds to the tender building of trust and community, had taught them that real change begins with embracing both our vulnerabilities and our strengths. As we wrap up this incredible journey of transformation and hope, we invite you to continue exploring inspiring stories like Mia and Alexander's. If you enjoyed this narrative and want to see more content that celebrates overcoming adversity and building a better future, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join our community for regular updates, behind-the-scenes insights, and many more moving stories that prove how every challenge can pave the way for a new beginning. Subscribe now to be part of a community dedicated to inspiring positive change. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that touch hearts and spark hope. Thank you for watching, and remember, every step toward change begins with a single, brave choice.